What if the oldest written words of humanity were never intended to narrate the beginning, but to caution us about the ending? What if the initial civilization wasn't initial at all, but the final remnants of something much more ancient? Under the scorching deserts of southern Iraq, where the horizon shimmers like an old illusion, pieces of clay murmur about an era the world has forgotten. Each mark carved by wedge, shaped by hands dead for 5,000 years, still faintly vibrates with intent, as if striving to safeguard not merely words, but the essence of memory. Before we wander deeper into the remnants, pause to like this video and subscribe, but only if you're pulled toward the sort of history that rests between archaeology and myth. And if you're remaining, drop a comment sharing where you're tuning in from and what time you're observing. I'd love to picture this tale spreading through time zones, gently lulling into dreams. The tale starts not with solutions, but with particles of dust. During the late 19th century, archaeologists excavating near Uruk and Eridu uncovered thousands of clay tablets. They anticipated basic origins, tentative etchings, attempts and mistakes, the gradual progression of human creation. Instead, what they discovered was a society that seemed already sophisticated. Systems of mathematics, layouts of cities, laws composed in flawless structure, and mappings of stars with astonishing accuracy. The Sumerians had entered history as though emerging from the debris of something prior. There was no steady development, no gradual ascent from stone to bronze. The oldest Sumerian cities, Eridu, Ur, Nippur, were not disordered communities. They were structured geometrically, oriented to astronomy, and designed with irrigation networks that challenged their presumed era. Their language emerged completely developed, with no recognized precursor, an isolated linguistic form, as if transported from elsewhere and placed intact. History favors gradual advancement, one instrument paving the way for another. But Sumer disrupted that pattern. Its accuracy suggested recollection, not origination. For more than a century, scholars have grappled with this. How could the earliest civilization start in full maturity? How could a group without documented forebears abruptly create star mappings that align with contemporary views, employ base 6 mathematics that influences our timepieces even now, and construct temples oriented to heavenly occurrences? As excavations delved further, it grew odder. The Sumerians themselves provided a response that disturbs us to this day. They inscribed that order, knowledge, and kingship came down from the skies. They didn't assert they originated civilization, only that they revived it. A tablet discovered in Berlin bears a haunting message. This is the rebuilding of what existed prior. Rebuilding, a term that alters all. If the Sumerians were reconstructing, what precisely had vanished? And what understanding did they hold of the era before the deluge? Picture grasping one of those tablets at this moment, the clay still retaining warmth in your hand, its impressions shaped like wedges conveying the rhythm of a hand that existed before all empires we recognize. At times, if you examine these relics closely, you spot fingerprints embedded in the clay prior to hardening, the imprint of a scribe possibly from 6,000 years past, a rhythm solidified in soil. And if you follow that contour with your gaze, you grasp that those hands could have been inscribing the final enduring pieces of an epoch wiped out by deluge, time, or maybe deliberate act. Through those symbols, they documented not only commerce and levies, but also healing, celestial studies, and odes to obscure deities. A tablet from Nippur notes the 584-day rotation of Venus, an accomplishment verified only by current telescopes. Another outlines the trajectories of Jupiter and Mars. Others hold mathematical equations preceding Pythagoras by 1,500 years. Relics display comparable oddities. Bronze implement surface centuries ahead of the Bronze Age. Cylindrical seals illustrate mechanical apparatuses. And there's the peculiar item called the Baghdad battery, which might have produced electricity 2,000 years before its era. And then come the narratives. The Sumerians recounted a massive flood that concluded a previous world. The identical account emerges in Akkadian writings, in Hebrew sacred texts, in Hindu sagas, even in Mesoamerican manuscripts. Societies divided by seas, by peaks, by thousands of years, all retaining the same disaster. How could they all preserve the same recollection? Maybe recollection drifts like sediment, depositing wherever awareness allows space. Or maybe the forebears exchanged more than we permit ourselves to envision. When archaeologists revealed the remnants of Uruk, they awaited rough starts. Instead, they encountered city barriers extending 6 miles, grand temples positioned with stellar alignments, and under one ziggurat, a collection of over 40,000 clay tablets. A society that chronicled itself in remarkable depth, yet bequeathed us more inquiries than resolutions. How did they acquire so much so rapidly? Where did their base 60 mathematics, not base 10, originate? Why did they chart the skies with such intimacy, as if recalling rather than exploring? Some investigators propose that Sumer developed from centuries of overlooked growth, minor communities erased by erosion and inundation. Others murmur that the Sumerians acquired their wisdom from a still earlier group, one obliterated by the disasters that concluded the last ice age. And then there are those who interpret the tablets directly, that the deities who came down from the sky were not spiritual gods but instructors, voyagers, or possibly survivors of a society that preceded us completely. But even doubters concede something unusual. The Sumerian chronology doesn't align. Societies aren't meant to appear fully organized. Yet here they did, farming, script, governance, melody, healing, all simultaneously. The clay tablets don't reveal attempts and failures. They exhibit polish, as if what we term the origin of civilization was to them a reconstruction. In Berlin's Museum of the Ancient Near East, a modest clay cylinder lies behind glass. The inscriptions on its face describe erecting a temple honoring Inanna, the deity of love and conflict. But amid the consecration phrases, one line distinguishes itself. This is the rebuilding of what existed prior, rebuilding, a term that suggests recollection, not creation. It's a subtle admission that even the Sumerians viewed themselves as successors to something more ancient. At times, when you inspect these relics closely, you observe fingerprints embedded in the clay before it's set, the imprint of a scribe perhaps from 6,000 years ago. And if you follow that contour with your gaze, you grasp those hands might have inscribed the last enduring pieces of an epoch, erased by deluge, time, or perhaps intent. The quietude between those phrases feels weighty, as though something immense had been removed, the way an absent tone can linger in a whole melody, the way a forgotten recollection lingers on the brink of slumber. Perhaps that's why these tales still murmur to us. They prompt us that what we label history could merely be the portion that endured the destruction. At night, when museums shut and lights dim, I envision those clay tablets respiring in the shadows, each one clutching the subtle recollection of a world we no longer identify. We believe we are the start of comprehension. but perhaps we are the final segment of recollection. And as the desert breeze sweeps over Uruk's remnants, bearing specks of ancient dust into another 1,000 years, you can nearly perceive the initial phrase of our overlooked tale, gentle, incomplete, awaiting rediscovery. If the Sumerians were not the origin, then whom were they commemorating? They stated kingship came down from heaven, not figuratively, not emblematically, but as a factual declaration etched in clay over 4,000 years past, a phrase that still quivers with something words strain to hold. After kingship came down from heaven, kingship resided in Eridu. It is the commencing verse of what we term the Sumerian king list, a record of sovereigns whose tenures extend far past the limits of human feasibility. But before we grasp who those unattainable kings were, we must initially observe what they bequeathed, because the clay tablets form only part of the narrative. The cities themselves murmur equally loudly. The earliest Sumerian communities, Eridu, Nippur, were not the disorganized expansion of a people adapting to coexist. They were structured geometrically, designed, aligned with purpose that verges on the eerie. When diggers first accessed Eridu's bases, they expected disarray. What they encountered instead was stratum upon stratum of building, each temple reconstructed precisely atop the previous, extending back almost 8,000 years. The most ancient edifices were not rough trials. They were already refined, directed to cardinal points, erected on elevated bases to respect celestial views, encircled by waterways that ran with crafted accuracy. The city of Ur, abode of the renowned ziggurat devoted to the moon deity Nana, discloses the same disturbing design. Its avenues were arranged in grids. Its barriers were enormous, strengthened with bitumen and baked bricks, materials demanding advanced furnaces and chemical insight. Residences featured drainage setups. Courtyards faced the heavens in intentional proportions. Even doorway placements adhered to astronomical directions, as if the constructors were projecting the skies onto the land. Nippur, Sumer's spiritual core, positioned at the hub of a city network, spaced in intervals matching musical tones and stellar rotations. Archaeologists have observed that the gaps between key Sumerian settlements mirror the same base 6 proportions in their mathematics, as though the whole society had been orchestrated rather than assembled. This wasn't coincidence. It was design that recalled something. And then there is the language itself. Sumerian exists solitary in human speech history. It lacks known kin, no linguistic predecessors, no developmental path retreating into basic shapes. It surfaces in the archaeological evidence fully shaped, intricate, exact, and inexplicably detached. Linguists have devoted over a century attempting to link Sumerian to other language groups. They've examined it against Indo-European, Semitic, Dravidian, even Uralic dialects. Nothing aligns. It resides beyond the language tree completely, as if grafted from elsewhere or someone else. To inscribe in Sumerian was to interact with a framework blending sound, emblem, and significance in manners that seem nearly programmed. Each cuneiform symbol could denote a term, a syllable, or a notion based on setting. The grammar was agglutinative, constructing meaning via stacked suffixes in designs needing exceptional linguistic refinement. The Sumerians themselves thought their script originated from Nisaba, the deity of wisdom, whose name signifies she who tallies the stars. They didn't claim to originate it, they said it was bestowed. And the more we examine their tablets, the tougher it grows to contend otherwise, because those tablets' content unveils something stranger than the language, wisdom that shouldn't be present yet. A clay tablet unearthed in Nippur's ruins documents Venus's orbital rotation with remarkable precision, 584 days, aligning with modern astronomical data. Another tablet plots Jupiter and Saturn's paths, following their locations over decades with accuracy needing multi-generational tracking and mathematical frameworks we link to far later societies. Star diagrams incised into cylinder seals display constellations we recognize today: the bull, the scorpion, the lion. But they also contain stellar allusions implying the Sumerians observed not only the apparent sky, but rotations within rotations, precessional changes requiring thousands of years to finish. How could an initial civilization monitor cosmic duration on that magnitude? And then there is the mathematics. The Sumerians utilized a base 60 numeral system, sexagesimal tallying, which underpins our contemporary world's unseen framework. 60 seconds per minute, 60 minutes per hour, 360 degrees per circle. These aren't random, they're Sumerian. Base 60 permits graceful division. It possesses more divisors than base 10, rendering it perfect for astronomy, geometry, and exchange. But it's also a framework demanding abstract reasoning, a grasp of fractions and proportions that most early groups took centuries to evolve. The Sumerians possessed it from the outset. Tablets from the Old Babylonian era, heirs to the Sumerians, disclose mathematical issues involving Pythagorean triples over 1,000 years before Pythagoras lived. They computed square roots, resolved quadratic equations, and comprehended geometric sequences. A tablet called Plimpton 322 enumerates number groups implying trigonometric insight we believed absent until the Greeks. Yet there it resides, etched in clay, quiet and enduring. As excavations deepened, the irregularities increased. Archaeologists revealed signs of advanced metalworking, bronze mixtures needing exact heat regulation, and awareness of tin procurement from far-off trade paths. Implements showing no developmental progression, no phase of attempts and errors, just abrupt proficiency. They discovered medical writings outlining surgical methods, pharmacological mixtures using numerous plant elements, and anatomical wisdom suggesting dissection and methodical study. One tablet catalogues symptoms and remedies for over a dozen ailments, arranged with clinical exactness. And throughout the remnants there was structure: bureaucratic logs, tax collections, land titles, temple stocks, worker payment records, the type of managerial intricacy requiring not just reading ability, but institutional recollection, systems transmitted and honed across generations. But where were those generations? Where was the clumsy start, the hesitant initial strides, the gradual rise from stone to bronze to iron? The Sumerian evidence displays none of that. It commences already advancing, already refined, already recollecting. The cities themselves appear to reflect this. In Uruk, beneath the majestic temples devoted to Inanna and Anu, diggers found older edifices, and beneath those still older, each stratum more polished than the one above, as if civilization contracted rather than expanded, becoming smaller, simpler, more amnesic as it advanced through time. It's the opposite of what we anticipate, and it matches perfectly what the Sumerians inscribed: that kingship, wisdom, and order descended from heaven. Whether they signified deities, mentors, or remnants of a forgotten group who endured some ancient disaster, their words indicate one clear concept: Sumer inherited civilization. It did not forge it. The clay does not deceive, it recalls. and what it recalls is a world preceding, a world that constructed in linear forms, tallied in 60s, followed stars over millennia, and left not debris, but resonances. Resonances maintained in city geometries, in language isolation, in mathematical accuracy, and in the disturbing refinement of a people who surfaced in history already alert. The question lingering in the quietude between those clay tablets is not how the Sumerians accomplished so much. It's who instructed them to recall. Among the thousands of tablets dispersed across museum holdings and dig sites, one text stands distinct, not for being grander or more elaborate, but for what it ventures to assert. It is known as the Sumerian King List, and it scans like a record of improbability. The tablet opens with a solitary line incised in the same wedge-pressed cuneiform employed for grain counts and trade logs. After kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. What ensues is a roster of rulers, names, cities, tenure durations, retreating through time until the figures disintegrate into something no longer seeming human. 8 kings are listed, 8 sovereigns who ruled the world prior to the flood. And their tenures are not gauged in decades or centuries. They are gauged in tens of thousands of years. Alulim, the initial king, reigned for 28,800 years. Alalgar, the second, for 36,000 years. Enmenluana governed for 43,200 years. On and on the roster proceeds, each name matched with a city: Eridu, Bad Tabira, Larak, Sippar, Shurupak, and each reign impossibly extended, as if time followed alternate rules. In sum, these 8 pre-flood kings ruled for 200 years. Then the tablet notes a single sharp sentence. Then the flood swept over. And after that sentence, all transforms. The tenures diminish. Mortality resumes, the kings succeeding the flood rule for hundreds of years, then decades, then spans recognizably mortal. The era of deities yields to the era of humans. The unattainable becomes the documented. The legendary folds into the ordinary, but the shift is fluid. The king list does not differentiate between the two periods in manner or form. It handles both with identical administrative accuracy, as if chronicling not fantasy but recollection. And that is what disquiets scholars most, because the Sumerian king list was not composed as legend. It was not an ode or supplication or verse intended to motivate or entertain. It was an administrative text incised in the same cuneiform script used for tax logs, temple inventories, and grain receipts. It was duplicated and reduplicated over centuries, with each scribe regarding it as official history. The cities named in the list are authentic. Eridu, the first city, has been unearthed. Its remnants extend back nearly 8,000 years, layer upon layer of temples constructed and reconstructed in the same holy location. Shurupak, home to the flood survivor Ziusudra, has been verified. Larak and Sippar, both real, both confirmed archaeologically. These were not fabricated sites. They were the foundations of a society that maintained records compulsively, that prized exactness, that documented everything from stellar movements to worker compensations. So why would they enumerate kings who governed for 36,000 years? Some scholars reject the figures entirely, deeming them amplifications to bestow divine validity on subsequent rulers. Others view them as copying mistakes accrued over centuries. But neither account explains the uniformity. Multiple editions of the king list endure, from Nippur, from Larsa, from Isin. And while specifics differ, the framework stays identical. 8 kings, impossibly extended tenures, then the flood, then mortality. It's too intentional to be mishap. And then there are those who observe the mathematics. The figures in the king list are not haphazard. They adhere to a design. Nearly all pre-flood tenures are multiples of 3,600, a unit the Sumerians termed the sar. In their worldview, the sar signified not merely a time span, but a heavenly rotation, the interval for specific planetary positions to revert to origins. Alulim's 28,800 years equals 8 sars. Alalgar's 36,000 years equals 10 sars. Enmenluana's 43,200 years equals 12 sars. The design recurs. The figures are not lifespans. They are astronomical symbols, epochs denoted by heavenly revolutions rather than human pulses. To scholars viewing the king list through this perspective, the pre-flood kings were not persons. They were emblems, protectors of stellar eras, incarnations of planetary rotations, representatives of periods so immense that only the stars could quantify them. Perhaps kingship descending from heaven was no figure of speech at all, but a declaration of cosmic arrangement, a system where sovereigns were selected, not by bloodline, but by harmony with the sky. But even this reading poses a question that looms over the whole text, like a shade. Why would an administrative culture embed astronomy into their royal descent? Unless they saw the two as indivisible, unless they perceived time, kingship, and stellar motion as one interwoven strand, one severed by the flood, and needing to be recollected, safeguarded, transmitted in clay, so it would never vanish again. Because to the Sumerians the king list was not symbolism, it was history. They believed these kings lived. They believed the tenures were authentic, even if the magnitude defied human grasp. And they believed the flood that terminated that era was not a tale crafted to justify hardship. It was a recollection of a genuine catastrophe, one so enormous it restarted civilization's timer. The flood did not obliterate fantasy, it obliterated recollection, and all that followed, every city, every temple, every cuneiform mark incised into damp clay, was an effort to reclaim what had vanished, to reconstruct not merely civilization, but remembrance. The king list is a text of endurance, a means of declaring, this is what we were, this is our origin, this is what the flood removed. And perhaps that explains why the figures feel so incorrect to us, because they aren't intended to quantify time as we do. They are intended to quantify loss. The span between what existed and what persists. The void between the era when wisdom descended from heaven and the era when humanity had to relearn everything gradually, agonizingly, from pieces. When you grasp that tension between the king list's administrative accuracy and the cosmic improbability of its figures, you start to comprehend why the Sumerians duplicated it so meticulously, why they regarded it as definitive, why they declined to alter the tenures into something more credible. Because to modify the figures would be to forget, and to them, forgetting was the sole true demise. The flood had already claimed one world. The clay tablets were their pledge that it would not claim the recollection of that world too. So the king list endures, incised into clay, quiet and enduring, a log of 8 kings who governed before the waters arrived, whose names still bear the burden of eras we can no longer envision, and whose tenures denote the border between the world we know and the world that submerged. And just past that border, beneath the swelling waters of the flood, rests the question that lingers in every line of the king list. If these kings were authentic, what sort of world did they govern? The answer lies interred under 10 feet of sediment. When archaeologists first accessed the deeper strata of ancient Sumerian cities, they anticipated continuity, one civilization transitioning into another. Layer upon layer of habitation, marking time's slow flow. What they found instead was disruption, a barren strip of deposit, clean, consistent, empty of pottery fragments, ash, or human signs. Flood silt. At the excavation in led by Sir Leonard Woolley in the 1920s, they dug through remnants of temples and dwellings until their tools hit clay, thick, water-deposited clay that extended down 8 feet before touching the scorched remains of an older community below. Woolley stood in the pit and realized he gazed at the tangible divide between two worlds. Beneath the silt, charred barriers, broken ceramics, the skeletons of a city ended in flames. Above the silt, fresh bases, reconstructed temples, a society ascending again from quietude. The same pattern surfaced at Shuruppak, the city of Ziusudra, the flood hero. Beneath the remnants, a layer of silt. And at Kish, another sediment band marking identical violent interruption. The dates differed slightly, around 2900 BCE, but the implication was clear. Something had overwhelmed the land. The Sumerian tablets portray it with bare simplicity. Then the flood swept over. No embellishment, no spectacle, just a single phrase splitting history into before and after. The age of deities and the age of humans, the world of impossible tenures and the world of death. And that simplicity, from a culture that logged everything in thorough detail, feels more like eyewitness account than legend. Because the Sumerians did not inscribe the flood as metaphor, they inscribed it as log, as recollection, as the instant when the old world submerged and the new one commenced, smaller and more vulnerable, but resolute in recalling what had vanished. The earliest version comes from a tablet found in Nippur, composed in Sumerian centuries prior to the Hebrew Bible. For 7 days and 7 nights the flood overwhelmed the land. The vast vessel was hurled by windstorms on the immense waters. The hero of this narrative is Ziusudra, whose name means life of prolonged days, or he who discovered life. In the Akkadian custom, he is Utnapishtim, in Hebrew writings, Noah. But the framework stays constant across all versions. A man alerted by a deity, a ship constructed secretly, a deluge that wipes the world, and a survival that safeguards not just existence, but wisdom. According to the tablets, Enki, the deity of wisdom, guardian of the sacred me, the divine tenets of civilization, approached Ziusudra in a vision, or perhaps via a reed hut's wall, murmuring so other gods wouldn't overhear. The gods' assembly, headed by Enlil, had resolved to terminate humanity. Mortals' clamor had grown excessive. The world was unbalanced. The verdict was absolute, but Enki couldn't endure seeing wisdom die with the carriers. So he alerted Ziusudra. He directed him to build a vessel, seal it with bitumen, bring aboard the essence of all living beings, not merely animals, but artisans, musicians, scribes, the guardians of recollection, the holders of the me. Abandon wealth and pursue life. Scorn possessions and safeguard the spirit alive. When the rains arrived, they didn't cease. The tablets state the tempest raged for 7 days. The great vessel was tossed on waters so vast they concealed the peaks. The world beneath, temples, cities, fields, everything disappeared under the turbulent darkness. And then quietude. When the waters withdrew, Ziusudra freed a dove, then a swallow, then a raven. The raven didn't return. It had discovered land. The vessel rested on a mountain, and Ziusudra offered thanks. The gods detected the smoke and descended, realizing belatedly they had almost erased their creation. Enlil was enraged that someone endured, but Enki protected Ziusudra, stating wisdom shouldn't perish with the evil. And so, as compromise, or perhaps burden, Ziusudra received immortality and was dispatched to reside in the land at the river's mouth, a realm where divine and mortal no longer connect. He became recollection itself, the living proof of what vanished. But here is the question archaeology won't release. Was this a tale or the resonance of actual endurance? Because the geological evidence implies something occurred. Across Mesopotamia, flood silt layers mark a sudden disastrous flooding around the King List's deluge period. Core samples from the Black Sea show dramatic water level rises about 7,500 years ago, when glacial meltwater breached barriers and submerged vast coasts in weeks. The last ice age's end, around 12,000 to 10,000 years ago, wasn't steady. It was marked by fierce climate changes, glacial outbursts, rapidly ascending seas. Coastlines hosting human communities for millennia submerged. River valleys turned seas, islands disappeared, and humanity on those coasts would have seen waters rise. They would have escaped inland. They would have borne what they could, implements, seeds, tales. And they would have recalled, because a flood erasing your world isn't forgettable. It becomes history's dividing line, the moment everything shifted. Flood legends appear in almost every ancient society. The Epic of Gilgamesh, Hebrew Genesis, Hindu Matsya Purana, Greek tale of Deucalion, Chinese legend of Gun, Mesoamerican stories of the fourth sun ended by water. How could civilizations divided by oceans and millennia all recall the same disaster? Perhaps because it wasn't one flood, but many regional calamities from the same global shift, each devastating enough to etch into shared memory. Or perhaps, as some investigators suggest, there was one colossal event, a comet strike, glacial failure, a breach so huge it reshaped global coasts and became the flood all cultures recall. The Sumerians believed the latter. They believed the flood wasn't regional. It was complete. It erased the old world, the world of pre-flood kings, where wisdom descended from heaven, of impossible tenures and celestial arrangement. And when waters finally withdrew, what lingered was quietude. The gods retreated. Kings became mortal. Cities needed rebuilding from pieces. And survivors like Ziusudra were charged with the holiest duty, to recall, to carry the seed of all living things, yes, but also the seed of all knowing things, the mathematics, star charts, medicine, language, the me, the divine codes once flowing freely from heaven to earth. That is why Sumerian tablets feel so pressing, why the king list was duplicated across centuries, why cities were reconstructed on older ruins, each an echo of prior. Because they weren't inventing civilization, they were reviving it. And the flood, the great quietude dividing their history, was the cause. After the quietude came the instructors. When floodwaters withdrew and survivors stepped into a world altered by emptiness, they weren't solitary. According to tablets, beings remained or returned to aid humanity in recalling what vanished. The Sumerians named them the Anunnaki. The name bears significance, those who from heaven to earth came, not figuratively, not emblematically, but as a label as exact as any descent or rank in their administrative texts. And what immediately distinguishes these figures, what sets them apart from later mythology's gods, is they weren't portrayed as all-powerful. They weren't remote, incomprehensible forces beyond mortal grasp. They were actors, designers, constructors, legislators, mentors, who strode among humanity and imparted knowledge for rebuilding. The tablets describe them with odd detail. Enki, deity of deep waters and me-keeper, taught agriculture, irrigation, healing arts. He warned Ziusudra of the flood, unable to see wisdom perish. His emblem was the serpent, signifying wisdom and renewal. His realm was Eridu, the first city where Mesopotamia's oldest temples rise from sand. Enlil, deity of air and tempests, oversaw law and order. He was the god's enforcer, who ordered the flood and later bestowed kingship on mortals. His Nippur temple was the world's navel, linking heaven and earth. To govern without Enlil's approval was illegitimate. Anu, deity of highest heavens, was the pantheon's father, distant yet foundational. His name appears in star charts, his Uruk temple aligned to celestial happenings. He embodied cosmic order, the structure holding all wisdom. And there were more. Ninhursag, mother deity shaping life from clay. Inanna, deity of love and war, whose heaven underworld journeys allegorized cyclic death and rebirth. Utu, sun deity bringing light and justice. But here's what separates the Anunnaki from legend. They weren't venerated as abstract concepts. They were logged, genealogies noted, cities named, human interactions preserved exhaustively as if scribes chronicled history, not crafted fable. The most disturbing records describe humanity's creation. In the Atrahasis epic, gods tire of toil. They built cities, dug canals, raised temples, but work is endless. So they devise a fix, create beings to bear the load. Enki and Ninhursag handle the task. They take Earth's clay, creation's primordial mud, and blend it with something else. Tablets say a god's blood, divine essence sacrificed to grant humanity intellect and spirit. From the god's flesh, let a spirit endure. Let it declare him as living emblem. Let the spirit endure so it's not forgotten. The clay is formed, divine blood mixed. From that union, humanity arises, part earth, part heaven, mortal in form, but bearing divine spark. To moderns this seems metaphor, but consider the wording, mixing essence, transferring spirit, creating from raw and inherited code. It reads less like verse, more like genetic design depiction, the deliberate life crafting via two sources, one material, one informational, clay and blood, body and plan. Scholars dismiss as mythic emblem, ancient explanation for existence. But Sumerians weren't vague in allegory. They logged grain shipments and star positions with clinical accuracy, matching god descriptions. When they wrote humanity made from earth and divine essence, they might have recorded something witnessed or inherited, but inexplicable. In the 1970s, researcher Zechariah Sitchin suggested controversial view. Anunnaki, not gods, but extraterrestrial arrivals, seeking resources, engineering humanity as workforce, leaving presence in myths. Mainstream rejected universally. Evidence didn't back literal visits. Anunnaki were archetypes, personified forces, celestial bodies, or deified forebears whose feats grew legendary. Yet descriptions persist. Anunnaki said, radiant, winged, descending in flame, traveling heaven-earth in unnamed vessels, cylindrical, fiery chariots, gleaming skyboats like lapis and bronze. Uruk cylinder seals show winged figures by celestial diagrams, planetary paths, stellar alignments, geometric patterns resembling advanced astronomy, not nature. And these descriptions, light beings descending, teaching forbidden wisdom, appear cross cultures divided by oceans, millennia, Hebrew watchers, Hindu divas, Andean viracocha, Mesoamerican feathered serpent. How could such uniformity arise separately? Perhaps not separate. Perhaps Anunnaki memory, or equivalent, predates flood, carried by scattered survivors, rebuilding isolated civilizations, each preserving same story fragments. Or perhaps Anunnaki weren't star visitors, but pre-flood civilization survivors, advanced culture with rediscovered knowledge, emerging from cataclysm to teach humanity's remnants. Technology beyond flood survivors' grasp, described as gods, we may never know. But tablets clarify what Sumerians repeated over millennia of records: civilization not invented, given. Humanity didn't stumble into agriculture, astronomy, writing, law via trials. Taught by beings from elsewhere, heaven, across seas, or drowned pre-flood world. To Sumerians, humanity's role, not creation. Remembrance, preserving entrusted knowledge, carrying me, divine civilization codes, through time not lost again. Anunnaki provided tools, laws, language, star charts, architecture, then withdrew. Not fully, but sufficiently. Direct communion era ended, gods distant, kings mortal. Humanity left with sacred duty, maintain inheritance, forgotten world's legacy encoded in clay, preserved in ritual, whispered through history's long quietude. So the question lingers, haunting every cuneiform mark incised into damp clay. What beings were the Anunnaki? And if they truly came from heaven to earth, where went they upon leaving? But knowledge isn't preserved solely in tales. Sometimes it conceals in formulas amid Inanna hymns, Enlil prayers, flood and creation epics. Archaeologists found unexpected, technical guides, texts without mythic intro, no god calls, just pure wisdom distilled, metallurgical recipes specifying bronze-copper-tin ratios, architectural dimensions using geometric ratios, medical texts listing dosages for pharmaceutical mixes, agricultural timelines aligned to celestial happenings, astronomical computations so precise modern scientists double-checked with models before acceptance. These weren't writings of experimenting civilization, writings of remembering one. Nippur Tablet VAT 4924 records Venus synodic cycle accurately, 584 days. Time for Venus to return relative to Earth, Sun. Requires multi-generational watch, sophisticated math, instruments tracking motion consistently. Ancient Greeks wouldn't chart Venus accurately for 2 millennia. European astronomers confirmed in Renaissance with telescopes, data centuries. Yet here, incised in clay, precise, enduring, as if Sumerians copied from older source. Other tablets record Jupiter, Saturn, Mars orbits, track lunar phases, solar eclipses, equinox precession, Earth axis wobble, completing 25,920 years. Observing precession needs not one lifetime, but generations of data transmitted meticulously. How could first civilization hold this, unless not first? Then, mathematics. 1940s archaeologists examined old Babylonian tablets, Sumerian successors, finding Plimpton 322 clay fragment. Seemed numberless, but analysis revealed Pythagorean triples satisfying a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Over 1,000 years pre-Pythagoras, tablet not teaching, applying for geometric problems, land calculations, architectural angles. Knowledge embedded, assumed, as if Carver inherited refined system, no need for origin explanation. Another tablet describes square root calculation via iterative method, like modern algorithms. Others show exponential growth grasp, compound interest, geometric progressions, concepts resurfacing in medieval Arab, Renaissance European work. Sumerians not discovering, using as handed complete, awaiting application. Not just abstract, physical relics tell odd tale. Eridu ruins yielded bronze tools cast perfectly, alloyed precisely, predating regional Bronze Age. Stone to bronze shift, suppose centuries incremental, refinement, trials. Sumerian bronze shows no evolution, appears suddenly optimized, as if metallurgy knowledge transplanted, not developed. Uruk cylinder seals depict mechanical devices, wheels, gears, pulleys, seeming advanced for context. Some show figures operating looms or drills, machinery implying torque, leverage, precision engineering grasp. Then object-defying timelines. Baghdad Battery, 1936 discovery near Kujut Rabu outside Baghdad. Clay jar, copper cylinder, iron rod, components generating small current with acid like vinegar, wine. Dated Mersh 250 BCE, Parthian period, when electrochemistry unknown. Some suggest electroplating gold jewelry, others ritual object, no function, but design clear. Primitive battery 2,000 years pre-Alessandro Volta's 1800 invention. Could Parthians stumble accidentally? Perhaps, or inheriting knowledge fragments stretching further. Site atop older layers, Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, each building on prior ruins, preserving lost echoes. Deeper digs age knowledge more. Feels like inheritance, not invention. Sumerians had word for this. Me. Translated divine decree, sacred ordinance. But meaning precise. Codes, principles, formulas in creation's fabric. Knowledge governing human civilization and reality structure. Over 100 me, each aspect, kingship, priesthood, music, metalwork, writing, warfare, justice, sexual love, decision-making. Possessing me meant civilization blueprint. Myths say me not mortal invented. Kept by Enki in Abzu depths, primordial waters under earth, passed to humanity via divine will or theft. One tale. Inanna travels Eridu, tricks drunk Enki into giving me. Loads onto boat, sails Uruk, bringing civilization. Enki tries retrieval, but Inanna crossed boundary, knowledge released. Strange myth, but holds older truth. Knowledge transferred, not created. Exists in original form. Civilizations rise, fall on access, preservation, transmission. Perhaps Sumerians conveyed science in tablets, astronomy, mathematics, metallurgy, not gradual discovery, product of remembering, recovering flood nearly erased, piecing fragmented once whole system. Deluge survivors didn't start zero, started ruins. Within, inscriptions, tools, star charts, formulas, enough rebuild if symbols recalled. Perhaps progress is this, slow, painful, remembering what once known. And perhaps Sumerians, rising flood with wet clay hands, understood better than we. Civilization not built, restored, science not invented, recovered. Every formula incised clay, every star chart heaven-aligned, every bronze tool fire-cast, not human ingenuity triumph, but survival monument, saying, this saved, this flood didn't take. But one mystery deeper than science, older than cities, more inexplicable than flood. Language. Sumerian stands solitary in human speech history, not poetically isolated, but linguistically orphaned, no known relatives, ancestral roots, evolutionary trail to simpler forms. Over century, linguists tried connecting Sumerian to families, tested Indo-European, English, Greek, Sanskrit, Persian. Nothing. compared Semitic like Akkadian, Hebrew dominating region later. No match. Searched Dravidian India links, Uralic Central Asia, even Basque isolate. Every try ends silence. Sumerian doesn't fit, exists outside language tree, has fallen elsewhere or risen older. Appears archaeological record 3500 BCE already fully formed. Complex grammar, sophisticated lexicon, writing system, precise recording, poetry, law, medicine, astronomy, clearly. No Proto-Sumerian, transitional, evolution evidence. Simply is. Then vanishes suddenly. By 2000 BCE, Sumerian no longer spoken, survived liturgical, temple-used, preserved scribes, studied like Latin medieval Europe. Dead language alive through ritual, forgetting would sever God's last link. Even dead, Sumerian haunted region. Akkadian scribes learned, Babylonian priests recited. Assyrian kings inscribed monuments, 2,000 years post-spoken, remained memory's language, tongue recording oldest truths, because to Sumerians, language not human invention. Gift. Tablets say writing from Nisaba, knowledge, grain, accounting goddess. Name, she who counts stars. Epithet linking literacy, astronomy, record-keeping, celestial watch, as if language cosmic measurement form. Nisaba not, poets, storytellers goddess. Scribes, preservers, calculators, transmitters. Writing Sumerian, sacred work participation, preservation act, not creation. Writing system reflects cuneiform, Latin cuneus, wedge, not modern alphabet. Older, layered. Each sign, sound, word, concept by context. Single wedge syllable, one text, divine symbol another. Signs geometric, triangles, lines, angles, incised reed stylus, damp clay, yet within geometry something encoded. Scholars note cuneiform signs mirror natural, mountain sign like peaks, water like waves, star asterisk radiating, script not representing, mirroring, capturing essence shapes. Writing, Sumerian, replication act, trapping divine speech clay before fading silence. Sumerians believed not inventing language, remembering, recovering given from above or before. Evidence strange, subtle, suggests right. 1970s, linguists analyzing Sumerian hymns noticed unusual, mathematical ratios, in verse structure, syllables per line, phoneme repetition, stressed/unstressed spacing, all followed harmonic musical intervals. Not coincidentally, precisely. Hymns composed ratios 2:3, 3:4, 4:5, defining musical consonants. Same ratios Sumerians tuned lyres, harps, embedded architecture, astronomical charts, as if language, music, mathematics not separate, but unified system expressions, code governing sound, meaning, number simultaneously. Some propose reflects ancient vibrational reality understanding. Sumerians believed universe harmonic structured, language human resonance attempt. Speak correctly, align cosmic order. Write, encode alignment clay. Word for knowledge, me divine codes encountered. But me connoted sound, vibration, utterance. God's not thought creation, spoke it. Me primal syllables shaping reality. If true, Sumerian, not language as today. Closer programming syntax, interfacing existence structure. If flood scattered humanity, divided tongues, Babel later. Sumerian last pre-flood tongue fragment, speech before waters. Hebrew Bible Genesis echoes, whole earth one language, one speech before tower, scattering, confusion. One language. Sumerians never called language Sumerian, modern term, called Emigir, noble tongue, princely language, name suggesting elevated, sacred, apart. Perhaps was. Perhaps pre-flood single language by antediluvian kings, Anunnaki taught, me encoded, unifying sound, meaning mathematics, describing objects, actions, relations, governing ratios, matter vibrations. Perhaps flood-drowned old world, language lost except survivor fragments like Zeusudra, past generations, incised clay not forgotten, by Sumerians' history appearance, language ancient, fragmented, not spoken fluently, reconstructed like archaeologists' pottery shards, wrote obsessively knowing fading, taught temple schools, sensing complete loss, loses pre-world bridge. Right they were. When Sumerian died spoken, irretrievable lost, thinking way, reality encoding, divine order connection, unrecoverable other tongues. Greeks later logos, word, reason, cosmos, ordering. Hebrews God's word making all. But Sumerians knew first, knew language not arbitrary, not human fumbled communication. Given, heaven descending, Nasaba taught, me encoded structured ratios, governing stars, music intervals, temple proportions, reading tablets, now silent, enduring, museum glass waiting, not just words. Last unified creation code echoes, language bridging heaven-earth. Tongue gods spoke. If listen closely, wedge marks incised clay 5,000 years past, almost here still, soft, geometric, singing ratios we no longer grasp. But language not soul bridge, long post-flood, post-old world swallowed water. Silence, humanity rebuilt lost. Not words alone, stone. Built towers, massive tiered rising Mesopotamia plains, like unnatural mountains flat landscape. Sumerians called ziggurats, Akkadian zikkuratu, build high. Dotted Sumer cities like mid-ascent frozen stairways. Ur-1, Uruk-1. Eridu, first city, one from oldest Mesopotamia sacred ground. Greatest all, echoing history myth millennia, Babylon. Called Etemenanki, house foundation heaven-earth. Not temple as we think, not worship place alone. Connection structure, anchoring heaven's earth, creating physical divine mortal meet point again. Because to Sumerians, connection severed. Flood not drowned old world, broke heaven-earth link. Gods withdrew. Once free descending knowledge, sky kingship, Anunnaki among mortals, communion faded memory. So humanity built, not pride, defiance, longing. Ziggurats not heaven stairways later claimed. Descent landing places, platforms inviting gods down, each level celestial sphere, cosmos layer. Each tier different color, black Saturn, white Jupiter, red Mars, gold Sun, mirroring night sky planets. Summit small temple, stars open chamber, furnished bed, table, food, drink offerings. Not priests, gods if returned, descended as tablets pre-flood said, found prepared place. Structure cosmos map, base earthly realm, solid square, cardinal aligned. Ascending tiers higher heavens, divine closer reality layers. Top earth sky meet, sacred chamber, Gigunu, heaven ground touch. Stand ziggurat base, look up, universe architecture rendered. Climb, ascend creation layers, mortal earth to God's realm. But climb not all, only priests ascend, trained sacred rites, old tongue hymns, doorway opening formulas worlds between. Climb external staircases, 3 to 4 flights outer walls, carrying offerings, chanting prayers, rituals calling gods back. But gods not come, or rarely, quietly dreams, just visions, no longer radiant physical old tablets described, direct communion age over. Ziggurat, despite grandeur, precision, thousands laborers, just decades construction, became absence monument, structure pointing something absent. Etemenanki, greatest, rose nearly 300 feet sky. 7 tiers, painted, aligned, astronomical/mythological encoded. Visible miles, Babylonian plain, man-made mountain, no mountain land. Greek Herodotus, visited 5th century BCE, described awe, immense tower stages, spiral summit path. Wrote top temple great couch, golden table, where priests said God Marduk descend dark rest. But Herodotus's time, ritual ancient, relic, once real memory now reenacted, performed hoping old connection restore, then later story reframing Etemenanki, not longing, hubris, Tower Babel. Hebrew Bible brief, humanity one language gathers Shinar plain, builds heaven-reaching tower. God alarms, behold, one people, one language. This beginning what do, nothing proposed impossible. So God confuses language. Builders can't understand. Work stops. Tower abandoned. Humanity scatters earth. Divided distance/speech. Story cautionary. Pride warning. Arrogance reaching heaven. Human effort. But not Sumerians telling. To them, tower not defiance. Remembrance. Desperate rebuild, flood destroyed. Not cities, temples, bridge itself, mortal divine connection once allowing free knowledge descent. Humanity creation partners, not abandoned servants' ruins. Tongues, confusion, not punishment. Tragedy. Unified language loss, perhaps original Sumerian, Imagir, me-carrier, not divine humble mortals. Final severing, last pre-flood world thread snap. Post-Babel, no single language encode divine ratios, resonate cosmos structure, only fragments, dialects, scattered once whole words pieces meaning, without unified language, tower incomplete. Not lacking engineering, ziggurats centuries built, but purpose not architectural, communicative, beacon, signal, resonance point, calling gods back. Without language and code call, structure stone, empty, silent, pointing heaven, no longer answers. From silence, history began. Not pre-flood impossible kings heaven descending knowledge, but recognized history, fragmented, divided, mortal. Nations, different tongues, cultures, language isolated. Civilizations rise, fall, each remembering lost, unable share memory distances. Ziggurats remained Mesopotamia scattered, eroding wind rain. Priests continued rituals, climbing tiers, offerings, dead language hymns to non-descending gods. At Temenanki, heaven-earth foundation house, stood silent, Babylon, summit stars open, chambers empty, stairways nowhere. Monument not human pride, human longing. Structure desperately remembering heaven-earth undivided. Gods walked below, mortals heard voices, one language, knowledge, bridge all connecting, but bridge broken. Remained towers upward, reaching silence, waiting never coming descent. Desert wind crosses Iraq pre-dawn hours, carrying once temples' dust. From above satellite silent modern orbit, Mesopotamia palimpsest-like. Civilization layers earth pressed, each faint waiting Uruk ruins barely sand above. Eridu sleeps excavation tarps. Ziggurat moonlight catches reconstructed tiers, geometry ghost empty plain. World museums, temperature glass behind, clay tablets rest, thousands, tens, thousands. Each memory fragment mud-pressed, time-baked hard. cuneiform marks visible, legible, whispering unspoken language. Somewhere silence marks between, space written, lost between, question hovers. What world pre-flood? Because followed everything, every anomaly, impossible number, inherited knowledge piece, point same disturbing conclusion. Sumerians not beginning, themselves said. Clay, stone, careful city geometry, called restorers what before. Not inventors, pioneers, restorers. Language appeared fully formed, no traceable ancestors. Mathematics arrived complete, ratios, formulas, millennia rediscovered. Astronomy tracked generational cycles, yet possessed start. Cities rose geometrically aligned, architecturally refined, as blueprint handed. Own records, bureaucratic, precise, detailed, described pre-flood world. Impossible kings, divine instructors, world knowledge heaven descended, humanity taught, not darkness fumbled. If word take, read tablets, not mythology, testimony, picture emerges, not civilization birth, older ones twilight, flood, great cataclysm, history dividing before, after, not human progress dawn. Moment earlier world drowned, survivors clutching lost fragments began long, painful remembering work. Centuries, scholars dismissed myth, allegory, ancient primitive origins, explained God's flood stories, but evidence accumulated. Mesopotamia geological surveys revealed flood silt layers, clean, sterile sediment, sudden deposited, separating burned, rebuild cities. Black Sea core samples showed 7,500 years dramatic inundation, rising meltwater barriers, breached, weeks drowned vast coasts. Satellite sonar mapped submerged ruins, India, Japan, Mediterranean coasts, megalithic stone circles, architectural remains, hundreds feet seawater, drowned ice age end, seas rose. Timeline aligned. 12,000 to 10,000 years past, planet catastrophic climate shifts. Glaciers collapsed. Sea levels 400 plus feet rose. Millennia human settlements coasts, vanished waves. If civilizations those coasts, advanced, organized, astronomy/architecture knowledge, erased almost. Only inland fled, carried what could, remembered lost, survived. Survivors told stories, great flood drowned world, once mortal walking gods post waters withdrew. Knowledge preserved, encoded, down past, not vanish. Sumerians, perhaps those survivors' descendants. Not first civilization, first rebuilders, took fragments, star charts, mathematical formulas, architectural principles, sacred language, clay-pressed endure, memory not die. If true, everything civilization birth call actually far older echo. Egypt pyramids, Malta megaliths, Göbekli Tepe temples, 11,000 years, pre-Sumer, supposed hunter-gatherers built, yet organization skill dozens tons, stones move. Not beginnings, endings. Fading world final monumental efforts, stone-built outlast memory, geometry encoded knowledge words forgotten. Sumerians understood. Why obsessively wrote, copied king list, flood story, Nisaba hymns, built ziggurats non-coming gods landing, preserved dead language 2,000 years post-spoken, knew everything lost meaning, inherited lost memory, flood not ancient history, living trauma generations past, identity encoded, survivors, children, fragments keepers, tasked pre-world not entirely forgotten, succeeded. 5,000 years, tablets endured, cities buried, excavated, language dead, deciphered, star charts match observations, mathematics inform clocks. Flood story every earth culture echoes, memory preserved. If true, everything civilization birth call actually far older echo. Egypt pyramids, Malta megaliths, Göbekli Tepe temples, 11,000 years, pre-Sumer, supposed hunter-gatherers built, yet organization skilled dozens tons, stones move. Not beginnings, endings. Fading world final monumental efforts, stone-built outlast memory, geometry encoded knowledge words forgotten. Sumerians understood. Why obsessively wrote, copied king list, flood story, Nisaba hymns. Built ziggurats non-coming gods landing, preserved dead language 2,000 years post-spoken, knew everything lost meaning, inherited lost memory, flood not ancient history, living trauma generations past, identity encoded, survivors' children, fragments keepers, tasked pre-world, not entirely forgotten, succeeded. 5,000 years, tablets endured, cities buried, excavated, language dead, deciphered. Star charts match observations, mathematics inform clocks, flood story every earth culture echoes, memory preserved. But preservation embedded warning clear. Every age forgets eventually. Civilizations rise, knowledge accumulate, monuments build, wisdom encode forever believed systems, then war, catastrophe, time erosion, slow, fall, knowledge lost, not all, enough. Next civilization overstarts, fragments piecing, restoration invention mistaking, progress calling really remembrance. We not immune cycle, own knowledge fragile, decay format stored, maintenance requiring systems, future generations may not understand languages chalk codes. If power grids fail, satellites fall, servers dark, how much survive? What leave aftercomers? Perhaps clay tablets wiser knew, simple, durable, shapes learn willing anyone readable, preservation technology empires, outlasted. Sumerians not primitive, survivors something we beginning understand. Message, clay-pressed, ziggurats, ruins buried. Remember built can lost, knowledge not permanent. Every flood, water, fire, time, world resets. Only durable encoded memory have rebuild chance. Next flood always coming. Perhaps climate collapse, perhaps nuclear war, perhaps slow forgetting complex, fragmented, reliant systems. No one fully understands civilizations grow. But come it will. When does survivors, if survivors, our ruins look as we Sumer look, dig cities, decipher languages, wonder much new, why not listen? Find satellites earth fallen, data centers silent, monuments eroded. If wise, find else. Durable something, encoded saying, this restoration what before, because end, all any civilization do. Preserve matters, forward pass. Trust someone somewhere, distant age find, understand. Desert wind crosses Iraq pre-dawn hours, carrying once temple's dust. And beneath dust, ruins beneath, flood silt beneath, burned cities, silent ziggurats, memory waits, patient, geometric, clay-pressed, dark still whispering. If true, everything civilization birth call actually far older echo. Egypt pyramids, Malta megaliths, Göbekli Tepe temples, 11,000 years, pre-Sumer, supposed hunter-gatherers built, yet organization skill dozens tons, stones move. Not beginnings, endings. Fading world final monumental efforts, stone-built outlast memory, geometry encoded knowledge words forgotten. Sumerians understood, why obsessively wrote, copied king list, flood story, Nisaba hymns, built ziggurats non-coming gods landing, preserved dead language 2,000 years post-spoken, knew everything lost meaning, inherited lost memory, Flood, not ancient history. Living trauma generations past, identity encoded. Survivors' children, fragments keepers, tasked pre-world not entirely forgotten, succeeded. 5,000 years, tablets endured, cities buried, excavated, language dead, deciphered. Star charts match observations. Mathematics inform clocks. Flood story every Earth culture echoes. Memory preserved. But preservation embedded warning clear. Every age forgets eventually. Civilizations rise. Knowledge accumulate, monuments build, wisdom encode forever believed systems. Then war, catastrophe, time erosion slow, fall. Knowledge lost. Not all, enough. Next civilization overstarts. Fragments piecing, restoration invention mistaking, progress calling, really remembrance. We not immune cycle. Own knowledge fragile, decay format stored, maintenance requiring systems, future generations may not understand languages, codes. If power grids fail, satellites fall, servers dark, how much survive? What leave aftercomers? Perhaps clay tablets wiser knew. Simple, durable, shapes learn, willing anyone readable, preservation technology empires outlasted. Sumerians not primitive. Survivors something we beginning understand. Message, clay-pressed, ziggurats, ruins buried. Remember built can lost, knowledge not permanent. Every flood, water, fire, time, world resets. Only durable encoded memory have rebuild chance. Next flood always coming. Perhaps climate collapse, perhaps nuclear war, perhaps slow forgetting complex, fragmented, reliant systems. No one fully understands civilizations grow. But come it will. When does survivors, if survivors, our ruins look as we Sumer look, dig cities, decipher languages, wonder much new, why not listen? Find satellites earth-fallen, data centers silent, monuments eroded. If wise, find else. Durable something, encoded saying, this restoration, what before? Because end, all any civilization do. Preserve matters. Forward pass. Trust someone somewhere, distant age, find, understand. Desert wind crosses Iraq pre-dawn hours, carrying once temples' dust, and beneath dust, ruins beneath, flood silt beneath, burned cities, silent ziggurats, memory waits, patient, geometric, clay-pressed, dark still whispering.